Nate Silver is a well-respected statistician within the confines of Washington politics. In 2008, he correctly predicted 49 out of 50 states, and in that process predicted that Obama would win the election. Same thing in 2012, where he predicted all 50 states. In 2016, he was wrong, but he was a little closer than most, giving Hillary Clinton, I believe, only a 70% or 78% chance of winning the election compared to everybody else that was giving her a 100% chance of winning. So he uses these complex equations with poll numbers to figure out what will happen. Now, when it comes to his punditry, he's not as good. In fact, he's terrible. Some would say he is complete garbage. I'm not saying it, but some might say it. So let me just give you an example of what happens when Nate Silver doesn't use numbers, when he just decides to be a pundit based on whatever feelings he has. So he tweeted this out. Mini thread. If you're someone on the left and you want to defeat Biden, a 76-year-old white guy, then maybe backing Sanders, a 77-year-old white guy, is not the way to do it. Okay. There is more to this tweet thread, and yes, I will read the other tweets, but there is so much here that I have to just break down. First of all, Bernie is not simply another white guy like Joe Biden. Bernie is Jewish. He'd be the first Jewish president. He lost half his family in the Holocaust. That is a different lived experience than the typical white guy. Now, you could say, yes, the way that society generally treats him is as a white guy. That's fair. But to ignore that being Jewish is a different experience than being white is really to be anti-Semitic. You can't ignore those differences. Now, on top of that, I mean, he faces anti-Semitism. I don't want to get too much into this, but there was a Florida man who was just convicted of threatening Bernie's life, and in the process, that man was using anti-Semitic remarks while threatening him. So that's another part of the Jewish experience that people that are white don't experience. But the real problem here, I mean, look at the framing of Nate Silver's tweet. If you're someone on the left and you want to defeat Biden, this is not about defeating Biden. This is about pushing a platform forward. It's about pushing policies, supporting policies that you want to see implemented, and picking the best candidate to do so based on their record and how much you can trust them. So when you see Bernie Sanders that has a 40-year record of fighting for the same thing, people are going to trust that man to fight for those policies compared to someone like Kamala Harris, who just decided a year ago that she now supports Medicare for all. There is a massive difference. So just to completely ignore Bernie's entire career of fighting for these issues, of being a leader on these issues, not even just fighting for them. He was supporting these issues long before anybody in Congress or anybody in the Senate was talking about it. Long before. He was supporting gay rights in the 80s, long before any Democrat was. He was pushing the issue of income inequality his entire career. I mean, just to completely ignore that entire history is to ignore why people support Bernie to begin with. So this leads into his next tweets on this. So let me read through these. Like it or not, identity, race, age, gender is a major aspect of what people vote on, and you're probably not going to persuade many voters to back Bernie over Biden on the basis of electability or leadership, since Biden was VP. Those are disadvantages for you, in fact. So you're really banking on making up a lot of ground on Bernie being closer to the center of the Democratic electorate on policy, which it's not clear he is, or voters agreeing with his institutional critique of the Democratic Party, which most Democrats won't. So this is Nate Silver, the numbers guy, using no data at all to back up what he is saying. And he's wrong. All you have to do is look at some recent polling. Medicare for all, supported by the majority of Americans, let alone supported by the majority of Democrats in higher numbers. Higher taxes on the rich and large corporations, supported by the majority of Americans, and yes, of course, the majority of Democrats. Ending American interventionism all around the world, supported by the majority of Americans and Democrats. Nate Silver, in providing no data to back up his claim, shows you how completely unaware he actually is. And the other point there, there's no Democrats don't agree with his critique of the Democratic Party. Have you looked at a poll recently on support of the Democratic Party? Because it's been going down historically, and support or independents are increasing. There are less people supporting Democrats and Republicans and more people that are independents now. That shows you that, yeah, a lot of people don't like these two parties. So they agree with Bernie's critique of the Democratic Party, or else they would still be Democrats. So this goes to the serious flaw in Nate Silver's thinking. This last tweet here spells it out. It's early, and Biden's post-announcement polling bounce will probably fade, but it's formidable enough that it maybe ought to prompt some reassessments of strategy. Bernie is limited in the number of arguments he can make versus Biden, when another candidate on the left might not be. Reassessments of strategy. Now, who is he referring to? Either he's talking about the Bernie campaign or he's talking about left-wing voters. In either case, he completely misses the point that politics is about people's lives. It's not a sport. So Nate Silver, before he was doing politics, he came from the world of baseball. That's his worldview. Nate Silver is looking at politics like a sport. He thinks, all the Bernie campaign has to do, or all left-wing voters should do, is reassess their strategy. There are other, in his mind, other left-wing voters or other left-wing candidates in the race. Why don't you just support those people? Because they don't have the track record or the platform that Bernie Sanders has. Now, you can look at Elizabeth Warren. She has some great policy proposals, has a fairly strong record, but has not shown a willingness to fight the establishment. I mean, back in 2016, she couldn't even bring herself to endorse Bernie Sanders. It shows you she has a flaw when it comes to buckling under the pressure that she feels in D.C. Tulsi Gabbard, another candidate, has a strong progressive record, but also has not been consistent. And also the likelihood of Tulsi Gabbard winning the nomination is very small, considering there are so many candidates in this race, and right now she has very little support in polling. So again, we are looking at someone in Bernie Sanders that has the track record, he has the platform, and he has the willingness to fight the system. That is why people support Bernie Sanders. But in the world of Nate Silver, because he looks at politics like a sport, he doesn't understand that this is actually about people's lives. It's not about calling balls and strikes.